The red sun beat down on Jai-Ho's back as he dug through the hot sand. Sweat ran down his face. He wiped it away with a dirty hand and kept digging. Around him, the wasteland of Dust Bowl stretched for miles. Nothing but sand, rock, and the sad remains of human settlements. Jai-Ho was 38 years old, but looked older. Life on Dust Bowl did that to people. His hands were rough from years of building and fixing things. His eyes were sharp, always looking for something useful in this harsh place. Jai-Ho, it's getting late, called Min from the edge of the dig site. You should come back before the dust storms start. Jai-Ho looked up at the sky. The air was still clear, but that could change in minutes. He had seen people get lost in the storms and never return. Just a bit longer, he called back. I'm close to something here. His grandfather's stories drove him to keep digging. As a child, Jai-Ho sat for hours listening to tales of Earth, a world of blue oceans and green forests, a place where rain fell from the sky, and people didn't have to fight for every drop of water. It seemed like a dream compared to Dust Bowl. 200 years ago, the aliens came. The old stories called them the Vizari. They looked like tall, thin creatures made of crystal. Their ships filled Earth's skies. Humans fought back, but their weapons were too weak. The war lasted only 3 days. Then came the Great Removal. The Vizari didn't kill humans. Instead, they moved every person to this planet on the edge of nowhere. No one knew why the aliens bothered to keep humans alive. Jai-Ho's shovel hit something hard. Not rock. Something smooth. His heart beat faster as he carefully brushed away the sand. Min, come here, he shouted. Min ran over, her boots kicking up sand. She knelt beside him and gasped. There in the sand was a piece of metal unlike anything they made on Dust Bowl. It had strange markings that glowed faintly blue. Is that? Min didn't finish her question. Vizari tech, Jai-Ho said quietly. Has to be. They worked faster now, digging around the object. More of it appeared. It was some kind of container, about the size of a small box. The whole thing glowed when Jai-Ho touched it. We should tell Han, Min said, looking nervous. Han was their settlement leader. He was strict about following rules. And the biggest rule was, don't mess with anything alien. Not yet, Jai-Ho said. Let me study it first. Back in his small home, Jai-Ho cleaned the box carefully. The sand fell away to reveal more glowing symbols. As he worked, the box started to hum. Then a panel slid open. Inside was a small crystal that pulsed with light. Jai-Ho hesitated, then picked up the crystal. As soon as he touched it, strange images filled his mind. He saw stars, ships, and weird machines, but most clearly, he saw the Vizari watching humans, studying them, like they were waiting for something. The vision ended as quickly as it began. Jai-Ho fell back onto his bed, breathing hard. The crystal was still in his hand, no longer glowing. A knock at his door made him jump. He quickly hid the box and crystal under his bed. Come in, he called. The door opened to reveal Tairi, the settlement's scientist. She was young, but very smart. Her eyes were serious behind her dust goggles, which now sat on top of her head. Min told me what you found, she said, closing the door behind her. Show me. Jai-Ho hesitated, then pulled out the box. I touched the crystal inside. It showed me things. He explained what he saw. Tairi listened carefully. This proves what I suspected, she said. The Vizari didn't just dump us here and forget about us. They're watching, waiting. But why? Jai-Ho asked. Tairi's eyes were bright with excitement. I think they need us for something. Something only humans can do. She pointed to the crystal. And I think this is the first clue to finding out what that is. Outside, the wind began to howl as the dust storm approached. But inside, a different kind of storm was brewing. One that would change everything for the humans trapped on Dust Bowl. The next morning, Jai-Ho and Tairi met before the sun rose. They needed to return to the dig site without others seeing them. In Jaiho's bag was the strange crystal box, wrapped in old cloth. "We need to be careful," Tairi said as they walked across the cold sand. "If the Vizari are watching us, they might not like us finding their tech." Jaiho nodded. "How long have you thought they were watching us?" 3 years, she said. "I've seen their ships. Small ones. They come at night when most people are sleeping." They reached the spot where Jaiho had been digging. The dust storm had blown away much of the sand, revealing more of what was buried. It wasn't just a box. It was part of something bigger. "It's a door," Tairi whispered, brushing sand away from a large metal panel. "Help me open it." Together they pulled at the edge of the panel. It moved slowly, then slid aside. Below was a dark hole with steps leading down. "No one has found this in 200 years, Jaiho said. "Why now?" Tairi pointed to the crystal. "I think that storm uncovered just enough for you to find it. And I think that crystal responds to you for a reason." They turned on their lights and went down the steps. The air was stale but breathable. At the bottom was a large room filled with Vizari technology. Screens lined the walls. Strange machines sat silent in corners. Tairi walked to one of the screens, her eyes wide. "This is a monitoring station," she said. "Look." She pointed to symbols on the wall that matched those on the crystal. Jaiho took out the crystal and held it up to the wall. The symbols glowed, and the room came to life. Screens lit up, showing different human settlements across Dust Bowl. "They've been watching us all along," Jaiho said. Tairi moved to a large machine in the center of the room. "This is different. It's not for watching." She studied it carefully. "Can I see the crystal?" Jaiho handed it to her. As soon as her fingers touched it, she gasped. The crystal glowed brighter than before. She placed it in a slot on the machine, and a beam of light shot out, scanning her head. "Tairi." Jaiho moved to pull her away, but she raised a hand to stop him. "It's okay," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes showed surprise. "It's reading me, my brain." The machine hummed, then displayed a 3D image of what looked like a human brain with parts glowing blue. "This is what they want from us," Tairi said, studying the image. "Our brains work differently than theirs. We can process certain types of information that they can't." "Why put us on Dust Bowl then?" Jaiho asked. "Why not keep us on Earth?" Tairi's face lit up with understanding. "Control. This planet has few resources. They thought we would struggle just to survive. We wouldn't have time or materials to advance our technology. We would stay primitive and dependent." She turned to Jaiho, excitement clear on her face. "But we adapted. We built settlements. We survived. And now, we found their technology." Jaiho walked around the room, looking at everything. "Can we use any of this to get off Dust Bowl?" "Maybe," Tairi said. "But first, let's see what else we can learn." She pressed something on the machine. A new image appeared, showing the crystal structure of a Vizari brain. Next to it was the human brain image. The difference was clear. The Vizari brain was orderly, with patterns like a perfect crystal. The human brain was a complex web of connections going in all directions. "Look," she said, "their minds are like computers. Logical, structured, but limited. Our minds can make new connections, new patterns. We can imagine things that don't exist. We can create." Jaiho understood now. They need our creativity, our ability to think in ways they can't. Tairi nodded, and they made one critical mistake when they put us here. "What's that?" Her eyes gleamed. "They gave us nothing to lose, and everything to fight for." As they stood in the alien room, a plan began to form. They would need help. They would need to tell Han and the others. It was time for humanity to use the Vizari's mistake against them. Above them, the red sun rose over Dust Bowl, another hot day beginning on the Wasteland planet. But for the first time in 200 years, there was a spark of hope. Han stood with his arms crossed, his face hard as stone. Jeho and Tairi had just finished telling him about the Vizari station. 5 other settlement leaders sat around Han's table, their faces showing different levels of disbelief. "You expect me to believe aliens are watching us because they like how our brains work?" Han asked. His voice was rough from years of breathing Dust Bowl's dry air. "I don't just expect you to believe it," Tairi said. "I can prove it." She placed the crystal on the table. It sat there, not glowing, looking like an ordinary rock. "This doesn't prove anything," said Dai, the oldest leader. His white beard moved as he spoke. "It's just a shiny rock." Jeho stepped forward. "It only works when a human touches it. Try it." Han looked at Jeho for a long moment, then picked up the crystal. Nothing happened at first. Then a faint blue glow began to spread from where his fingers touched it. Han nearly dropped it in surprise. "What's it doing?" he asked. "Reading your brain patterns," Tairi explained. "The Vizari need our minds because we can think in ways they can't." "And you believe we can use this against them?" Han asked, still holding the glowing crystal. Jeho nodded. "They put us here thinking we'd just survive, not advance. But we're humans. We adapt. We overcome." A new voice spoke up. It was Sue, the woman who trained the settlement's guards. She was short but strong, with scars on her arms from many fights. "If what you say is true, we need to act carefully," she said. "I fought raiders from the eastern wastes. Fighting aliens will be much harder." "We're not talking about fighting," Han said, putting the crystal down. "We're talking about survival." "No," Jeho said firmly. "We're talking about more than just surviving. We're talking about leaving Dust Bowl." The room went silent. The idea of leaving their planet was something no one had seriously considered in generations. "Impossible," Da muttered. "Nothing is impossible," said a thin man named June. He rarely spoke at meetings, but when he did, people listened. He worked with the settlement's communication systems. "If the Vizari have technology down there, we might be able to use it. Maybe even call for help." "Help from who?" Han asked. "We're alone out here." "Maybe not," Tairi said. "The Vizari must have enemies. Other species who don't like what they do." Sue leaned forward. "So you want to use alien tech to contact other aliens who might help us fight the first aliens?" She shook her head. "Sounds risky." "Everything about living on Dust Bowl is risky," Jeho replied. "But for the first time, we have a chance to do more than just survive another day." Han paced around the table, thinking. Finally, he stopped and looked at each person. "We need to see this station," he decided. "All of us. Then we vote on what to do." The next day, all 7 of them entered the Vizari station. Tairi showed them how the crystal activated different machines. June spent hours studying the communication devices. Sue examined what looked like weapon designs on one screen. By evening, they gathered in Han's home again. The mood was different now. There was energy in the room, a feeling Jeho hadn't seen before. "I've made my decision," Han said. "We form a resistance. We learn everything we can about the Vizari. We find a way off this rock." "I'll train people to fight," Sue said. "We'll need defenders." "I can study their tech," June added. "Learn how to use it. And I'll need help understanding their biology," Tairi said. "How they think. Their weaknesses." Jeho looked around at the determined faces. "We'll need to contact other settlements." Quietly. "The more people who help, the better our chances." Han nodded. "Then it's settled. From today, we stop being survivors." He placed his hand on the crystal, making it glow bright blue. "Today, we become the resistance." As they talked long into the night, planning their next steps, Jeho felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The Vizari had made their mistake. They had given humans time to adapt, to become stronger. And now, humanity would show them exactly what that mistake would cost. 3 years passed. The resistance grew slowly but steadily. People from 12 different settlements now worked together in secret. They built a hidden base in a canyon where sandstorms rarely reached. Inside the canyon walls, they studied Vizari technology day and night. Tairi worked harder than anyone. She barely slept. Her small room in the base was filled with notes and drawings of Vizari tech. Today, she sat in front of a large Vizari computer they had moved from the original station. The crystal glowed in its slot. "You should rest," Jaiho said, bringing her water. "You've been working for 2 days straight." Tairi took the water but didn't drink. "I'm close to something," she said. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. "The way these machines connect with our brains, there's something we're missing." Jaiho sat beside her. Over the years, they had become close friends. Maybe more than friends, though neither had said it out loud. "What do you think we're missing?" he asked. Tairi pointed to a screen showing brainwaves. "The Vizari don't just want our brain patterns. They want to use them. When I connect to this machine, it's like it's trying to copy parts of how I think." Before Jaiho could respond, Jun rushed into the room. "A Vizari ship is coming," he said. "Our lookouts spotted it entering the atmosphere." They had seen Vizari ships before, small ones that came to check on their monitoring stations. But this was the first one since they'd started using the Vizari tech. "Will they know what we're doing?" Jaiho asked. "I don't think so," Tairi said. "But this might be our chance, if we can hack into their systems when they connect to the monitoring station." "Too dangerous," Jun said. "We should hide everything and wait until they leave." Tairi shook her head. "No, this is what we've been preparing for." She turned to Jaiho. "Get Han and Sue. We need to make a decision fast." Minutes later, the 5 leaders gathered. "We have 2 hours before the ship reaches the nearest monitoring station," Jun explained. "They'll probably stay connected for about 30 minutes before leaving." "Can we hack their systems in that time?" Anne asked. Tairi nodded. "Maybe. But I need to try something first." She looked at Jaiho. "I need your help." She led him to the Vizari computer. "I think one person alone can't do this. We need to connect together." "What do you mean?" Jaiho asked. Tairi placed 2 crystals in the machine. "When 2 humans connect at once, our brain patterns might create something the Vizari never expected." It was risky, but they had no time to debate. Jaiho and Tairi each placed a hand on a crystal. The machine hummed louder than ever before. Jaiho felt a strange sensation, like his mind was stretching. "I can feel you," Tairi whispered. "Your thoughts." Together, their minds pushed into the Vizari system. Suddenly, they could see data flowing like rivers of light. They moved through it faster than should be possible. "There." Tairi's voice seemed to come from inside Jaiho's head. "The ship is connecting now." Their combined minds reached out and touched the ship's systems. Images flashed before them. Star maps, Vizari worlds, and most importantly, information about the Vizari themselves. "They're using human neural patterns to power their quantum computers," Tairi realized. "Our brains can solve problems their crystal minds can't process." Then they found something else. Messages about another alien species. The Vizari were fighting a war against beings called the Nereid, and they were losing. "The Vizari are vulnerable," Jaiho said as they pulled back from the connection. Both of them were sweating and shaking. "They need us more than we realized." Sue looked at the data they had stolen. "This changes everything," she said. "We now know their weakness." Han studied the star maps. "And we know where they are." Jun pointed to designs they had downloaded. "We can build ships with this. Real ships that can leave Dust Bowl." Tairi looked at her hands, still trembling from the connection. "The Vizari never expected 2 human minds to work together like this. They see us as resources to be used individually." Jaiho stood up, his mind still buzzing with new knowledge. "Then we'll show them what humans can really do when we work together. It's time to build our way off this planet." Outside, the red sun was setting, casting long shadows across the canyon. In the growing darkness, Humanity's first starships were about to be born. 8 months later, 3 small ships sat hidden in a deep canyon. They didn't look impressive. Their hulls were made from scrap metal found across Dust Bowl. But inside, they held Vizari technology that Jai-Ho and the others had built with their new knowledge. "Are they ready?" Han asked as he walked around the largest ship. They called it Hope. Jai-Ho nodded. "We tested the engines yesterday. They worked better than we expected." Nearby, Sue was training 20 men and women. They would be the first humans to leave Dust Bowl in 200 years. Sue had chosen them carefully, the strongest, smartest, and bravest from all settlements. "My team is ready too," Sue said, joining Han and Jai-Ho. "They know it's dangerous. They know some might not come back, but they're willing to go." Tae-Rai emerged from inside Hope. Her face was smudged with grease, but her eyes were bright. "The neural interface is working," she said. "We can control most of the ship's systems with our minds." That night, the resistance leaders held their final meeting before the mission. A map of nearby space glowed on the table between them. "Our target is here," Jai-Ho said, pointing to a small moon around a gas giant. "It's a Vizari outpost, not heavily guarded, according to the data we stole. We go in, take what we can, and leave before they know what happened." "What exactly are we looking for?" asked one of the new captains, a woman named Sun. "Better technology," Tae-Rai explained. "Components we can't build here. And more information about the Vizari and this war they're fighting." Jun spoke up. "I've prepared communication devices for everyone. They work across great distances using quantum links. You'll stay in contact with us, no matter how far you go." Han looked at each person in the room. "This is the most important moment in human history since the Vizari took us from Earth. If you succeed, we begin our journey home. If you fail..." He didn't finish the thought. "We won't fail," Jai-Ho said simply. The next day, as Dust Bowl's red sun rose, the 3 ships lifted off. They rose slowly at first, fighting the planet's gravity. Then they picked up speed, breaking through the thin atmosphere and into space. Jai-Ho sat in the captain's chair on Hope. Through the window, he watched Dust Bowl grow smaller below them. It was a red and brown ball of dust, his home for all his life. Now it looked small and sad. "Setting course for the Vizari outpost," said the pilot, a young man named Quan. The ships turned and accelerated toward their target. The journey would take 4 days. 4 days of waiting and wondering what they would find. On the 3rd day, Tae recalled Jai-Ho to the science room. She was looking at data from the ship's sensors. "I've been studying the Vizari technology as we travel," she said. "There's something strange about it." "Strange how?" Jai-Ho asked. "It's all perfect. Too perfect." She showed him diagrams of Vizari machines. "There are no experiments, no failures, no different designs. Everything is the optimal solution to each problem." "Isn't that good?" Jai-Ho asked. Tae shook her head. "No living species develops technology that way. You try things, you fail, you learn, you improve. The Vizari technology shows none of that process." Jai-Ho started to understand. "You're saying they can't innovate. They can't create new things." "Exactly," Tae said. "They can only optimize what already exists. They can make something better, but they can't imagine something new." Her eyes were wide with excitement. "That's why they need human minds. We can create. We can innovate. We can imagine things that don't exist yet, and then make them real." Jai-Ho thought about this. "So their great weakness is their perfect, logical minds," Tae finished. "They can't think outside their crystal boxes, but we can." On the 4th day, the outpost came into view. It was a silver structure clinging to the dark moon. It looked cold and perfect, like all Vizari things. "Prepare for our approach," Jai-Ho said over the ship's comm. "Remember, we do what humans do best. We surprise them." The ships accelerated toward their first target, carrying humanity's hope for freedom. Back on Dust Bowl, Han watched the sky. 2 weeks had passed since Jai-Ho and the others left. The plan was for them to return within 10 days. Han tried not to worry, but it was hard. Any word from them? He asked June, who worked at the communication station day and night. Nothing since their message about raiding the outpost, Jun said. His eyes were tired. The quantum link should work no matter how far they are. I don't understand the silence. Suddenly, one of the lookouts ran into the room. Ships, she shouted, coming from space. Han's heart jumped. Our ships. Jai-Ho's team. The lookout shook her head. No. These are bigger, different shape. Must be Visari. Han's face turned grim. Sound the alarm. Get everyone to the emergency shelters. Across all 12 settlements, people rushed to hide. The resistance had built underground bunkers for this very reason. They knew the Visari might discover what they were doing someday. 3 massive Visari ships descended from the sky. They were shaped like long crystals, sharp and perfect. They landed near the largest settlement. From inside the lead ship, strange crystal figures emerged. The Visari. They were tall and thin, their bodies like walking gems with many flat sides. They moved stiffly but quickly. In the main bunker, Han, Jun, and the other leaders watched through hidden cameras. What are they doing? Han asked. On the screen, the Visari were setting up devices around the settlement. The devices dug into the ground and began to glow. They're scanning for our technology, Jun said, looking for their stolen tech. Will they find the bunkers? Someone asked. Jun shook his head. We lined them with materials that block their scans. As long as everyone stays quiet, and still, we should be safe. But not everyone had made it to the bunkers. Some had been working far from settlements when the alarm sounded. The Visari found 10 humans and took them to their ships. In the bunker, Tyree's assistant Yuna worked on something urgent. I've been developing a defense system, she told Han. Based on Tyree's research, it uses our brain waves to disrupt Visari technology. Will it work? Han asked. I don't know, Yuna admitted. We never got to test it. Days passed. The Visari continued to search the settlements. They seemed angry, moving faster, breaking into homes. They knew humans had taken their technology. Then on the 6th day, something changed. The Visari suddenly returned to their ships. The ships lifted off, but they didn't leave Dust Bowl. They just hovered high above. What are they doing now? Han wondered. That night, they found out. The ships fired energy beams at the largest water storage tank. The tank exploded, sending precious water into the dry sand where it quickly disappeared. They're attacking our resources, Jun said. They want to force us out of hiding. Han's face hardened. We need to fight back. Yuna, is your defense system ready? As ready as it will ever be, she said. They prepared to use Yuna's system when something unexpected happened. New ships appeared in the sky. But these weren't Visari ships. Look, Jun pointed at the screen. 3 familiar ships were flying toward Dust Bowl, with 5 larger, unknown vessels behind them. It's Jai-Ho, Han said. That's hope. They're back. The Visari ships turned to face the newcomers. Energy beams shot out, but the new ships moved in ways the Visari didn't expect. They were fast and unpredictable. Jai-Ho's voice suddenly came through the communication system. Han, can you hear me? We brought help. We hear you, Han replied, his voice shaking with relief. Who's with you? The Nereid, Jai-Ho said. The ones fighting the Visari. They want to help us. In the sky, the battle continued. The Nereid ships moved like living things, flowing around Visari attacks. One Visari ship was hit and fell from the sky. The other 2 retreated, shooting up into space. As the dust settled, Jai-Ho's ships landed near the main settlement. The larger Nereid ships stayed in the sky, keeping watch. Han and the others emerged from the bunkers. They watched as Jai-Ho, Tairi, and Sue walked out of hope. Behind them came strange beings. They looked like shifting shadows with points of light where eyes might be. Han, Jai-Ho said, "Meet our new allies. The Nereid want the Vizari gone as much as we do." The largest shadow being moved forward. Somehow, everyone could hear its thoughts in their minds. "Humans," it seemed to say, "you have done what no other species has managed. You have defied the Vizari. We wish to learn from you." Han looked from the shadow beings to Jai-Ho. "You have a lot to tell us," he said. Jai-Ho nodded. "More than you can imagine." Inside the largest meeting hall on Dust Bowl, humans and Nereid gathered. The room felt different with the shadow-like aliens present. The air seemed to move and shift around them. Jai-Ho stood in the center, telling the story of their mission. "When we reached the Vizari outpost, we found it nearly empty," he said. "Just a few Vizari guards. We took what we needed, but as we were leaving, a Nereid ship appeared." Tae-Ri continued the story. "We thought they would attack us. Instead, they sent us a message. They were surprised to find humans so far from Dust Bowl. The Nereid have been watching the Vizari for years," Sue added. "They knew about us, but they thought we were just prisoners with no technology." The largest Nereid moved forward. Its shadowy form rippled as it communicated directly to everyone's minds. "We have fought the Vizari for 300 of your years," the thought voice said. "They take worlds, they take resources, they take minds. But never have we seen them fear anything as they fear humans." "Fear us?" Han asked. "Why would they fear us? They have better ships, better weapons, but not better minds," the Nereid replied. "Your kinds of thoughts are dangerous to them. Your creativity, your ability to imagine new things." Jai-Ho nodded. "The Nereid showed us. The Vizari can only make perfect copies or minor improvements to existing things. They can't invent new solutions." The Nereid's lights flickered. "We witnessed your small ships using our attack patterns in new ways. Ways we had not thought of. This is what the Vizari fear." Sue, always practical, spoke up. "What exactly do you want from us?" "An alliance," the Nereid answered. "We offer technology, ships, weapons. In exchange, you offer new ideas, new ways of fighting. Together, we can end Vizari rule." The meeting continued for hours. The Nereid explained how the Vizari controlled hundreds of worlds, using the minds of different species to solve problems their crystal brains could not. "So we're not the only ones they've trapped somewhere," Jun said. "No," the Nereid confirmed. "Many species serve them. Most do not know others exist. The Vizari keep each species separate." Han studied the star maps the Nereid showed them. "If we help you, what happens after? Will you help us find Earth again?" "Yes," the Nereid's thought voice promised. "All species deserve their homeworlds." Later, the human leaders met alone to discuss the offer. "I don't trust them completely," Sue said. "They're aliens, just like the Vizari." Jai-Ho shook his head. "They're different. The Vizari want to use us. The Nereid want to work with us." "How can you be sure?" Han asked. "When we were on their ship," Tae-Ri explained, "they shared their knowledge freely. They didn't hide anything. And they were curious about us, about how we think. The Vizari never cared about that." June, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "The Nereid need us. The Vizari are winning their war, but with human creativity and Nereid technology, we might change that." "It still feels like trading one alien master for another," Sue argued. "Not if we're careful," Jai-Ho said. "Not if we remember who we are. Humans don't stay down. We don't just survive. We rise." Han looked at each person in turn. "We vote then. Do we ally with the Nereid?" One by one, they'd voted yes. Even Sue, though she added, "But we watched them closely." The next morning, humans and Nereid began working together. The shadow aliens brought more ships down to Dust Bowl's surface. Inside these ships were wonders humans had never seen, materials that changed shape on command. energy sources that never ran out, weapons that disrupted Vizari crystal technology. Tyree worked closely with the Nereid scientists, if they could be called that. They traded knowledge quickly. Humans learned about stars and planets beyond their system. The Nereid learned about human art, music, and games. They're fascinated by our stories, Tyree told Jai-Ho one evening, especially ones where the hero wins against impossible odds. Jai-Ho smiled. Then we should tell them our story, about how humans trapped on a wasteland are going to defeat the Vizari. As the sun set on Dust Bowl, new ships were already taking shape, ships designed by human minds and built with Nereid technology. And for the first time, these ships had weapons. The Vizari had made their critical mistake. They had left humans alive, believing they could never escape Dust Bowl. Now humans would show them just how wrong they were. 6 months passed. Dust Bowl had changed. Between the red sand dunes stood new buildings made of shining materials. The Nereid ships came and went freely, and humans trained every day for war. In the command center, Jai-Ho, Tyree, and Sue stood with the Nereid leader, who they now called Shade. They looked at a large map of Vizari space. The time has come, Shade's thought voice told them. Our ships are ready. Your people are trained. We must strike at the heart of the Vizari Empire. The homeworld, Jai-Ho said, looking at a crystal planet on the map. It glowed with cold blue light. Are we really ready for that? We have to be, Sue said. She wore armor made by the Nereid, black with lines of silver that moved like liquid. The longer we wait, the more the Vizari prepare for us. Tyree pointed to the planet. Our scans show something strange there. Massive energy readings, unlike normal Vizari technology. That is why we must go, Shade said. We believe the Vizari are building something dangerous, something that uses the power of many minds. The fleet left Dust Bowl 3 days later. 20 large Nereid ships and 50 smaller human ships. Each human ship had a crew of 5, all trained to work with Nereid technology. Jai-Ho commanded the lead human ship, now called Freedom. Tyree led the science team. Sue directed the fighters. Han stayed on Dust Bowl to lead those who remained. The journey to the Vizari homeworld took 2 weeks. They moved carefully, hiding behind moons and asteroids when Vizari patrols passed. The Nereid's shadow technology helped them stay hidden. As they approached the crystal planet, Tyree called Jai-Ho to the science room. Look at these readings, she said, showing him a screen filled with data. The energy patterns are familiar. Jai-Ho studied them. They look like brain waves, human brain waves. Tyree nodded, her face pale. Exactly, but thousands of them, all together. How is that possible? Jai-Ho asked. Before she could answer, Shade entered the room. The Nereid's shadow form seemed darker than usual. We have discovered something terrible. Shade's thought voice was heavy with concern. The Vizari are not just using human neural patterns. They are taking human minds themselves. What do you mean? Jai-Ho asked, though he feared he already knew. When the Vizari took humans from Earth, Shade explained, they did not bring all of you to Dust Bowl. Many were taken to the homeworld. Their consciousness was removed from their bodies and stored in vast computation matrices. Jai-Ho felt sick. You mean there are human minds trapped in Vizari computers? Thousands, Shade confirmed. Perhaps tens of thousands, trapped for 200 years, solving problems for the Vizari. The news spread quickly through the fleet. What had been a mission of freedom now became a rescue mission too. The attack began at dawn, local time on the Vizari homeworld. The Nereid ships struck first, targeting defense stations around the planet. Human ships followed, using attack patterns the Vizari had never seen before. They're confused, Sue reported, watching the Vizari ships try to respond. They can't predict our movements. The combined fleet broke through the outer defenses. Jai-Ho led a small team of ships toward the surface, heading for the largest energy reading. That's where the mines must be, Tairi said from her station. In that crystal tower. The tower rose from the planet's surface like a giant shard of glass. Around it, smaller crystal buildings formed a city unlike anything humans had seen. Everything was perfect, symmetrical, cold. Vizari ships rose to meet them. The battle was fierce. Several human ships were hit. Jiho watched as friends he had known for years disappeared in flashes of light. We need to land near the tower, he told his pilot. Can you get us there? The pilot, a young woman named Ara, nodded. Hold on tight. Freedom dived toward the surface, dodging energy beams. 3 other human ships followed. Behind them, Su led the fighters, keeping the Vizari ships busy. As they approached the tower, Jiho felt something strange, a pulling in his mind, voices calling to him. Do you feel that? He asked Tairi. She nodded, her eyes wide. It's them. The trapped minds. They know we're here. Freedom landed with a hard thud near the base of the tower. Jiho looked out at the crystal world, knowing that inside that tower were thousands of human minds waiting for freedom. Let's bring our people home, he said, putting on his helmet. Jiho, Tairi, and 8 other humans ran toward the crystal tower. The surface of the Vizari homeworld was hard and smooth. Their boots made clicking sounds as they moved. Above them, the battle continued. Flashes of light filled the sky as human and Nereid ships fought the Vizari. The entrance should be ahead, Tairi said, checking the small device the Nereid had given her. The energy readings are getting stronger. As they got closer to the tower, the voices in their minds grew louder. Not words, exactly, but feelings. Hope, fear, excitement. The trapped human minds knew something was happening. 2 Vizari guards stood at the tower entrance. They were tall crystal beings with multiple arms, each holding a weapon. Jiho signaled to his team. They had practiced this. 2 humans fired special guns that the Nereid had designed. Instead of bullets, the guns shot energy that disrupted crystal structures. The guards shattered like glass, falling into piles of shining dust. That was too easy, Su said over the comm. She was still in space, leading the battle. Be careful in there. Inside the tower, everything glowed with blue light. The walls were made of clear crystal, but they seemed to move, as if something flowed inside them. This way, Tairi said, following her device. The mines are being kept on the top level. They found a lift that took them up through the center of the tower. As they rose, they saw more of the Vizari city through the clear walls. It was under attack now. Nereid shadow ships moved between the crystal buildings, firing at defense points. At the top level, they found what they were looking for. A vast room filled with thousands of crystal containers, each one pulsed with light. Each one held a human mind. How do we free them? Jiho asked. Tairi moved to a large control panel. The Nereid gave me instructions. We need to connect our minds to the system and create a path for them to escape. Suddenly, 3 Vizari appeared. They were different from the guards, taller, with more facets to their crystal bodies. Leaders, perhaps. One spoke, its voice like glass breaking. Humans, you should not be here. You belong on Dust Bowl. We don't belong anywhere you put us, Jiho replied. We're taking our people back. These mines are Vizari property, the crystal being said. They solve problems we cannot. They imagine what we cannot imagine. They are essential to our survival. While Jiho kept the Vizari talking, Tairi worked on the control panel. 2 other humans stood guard, weapons ready. You made one big mistake, Jiho told the Vizari. You thought keeping us on a wasteland would break us. But humans don't break. We adapt. We overcome. And we never forget our own. The Vizari leader stepped forward. You cannot free these minds. The process is not reversible. We'll see about that, Jiho said. He nodded to Tairi. She placed her hands on 2 crystal points on the panel. Jiho did the same with 2 others. Instantly, they connected to the system. The voices in their minds became clear words now. Thousands of human minds, trapped for centuries, suddenly aware of rescue. Now, Tairi shouted. Jai-Ho pushed his consciousness into the system, creating a path as the narrate had taught him. It felt like opening a door in his mind. The trapped minds rushed toward it. The Vizari leaders moved to stop them, but the human guards fired. One Vizari shattered. The others fell back. It's working, Tairi said, her voice strained. They're coming through. In space, Sue watched in amazement as every narrate and human ship began to glow with blue light. The freed minds were spreading through their systems, finding new homes in the computers. The Vizari ships are stopping, her pilot reported. They've frozen in space. Inside the tower, Jai-Ho and Tairi pulled away from the panel. The crystal containers were dark now, empty. Where did they go? One of the team asked. Everywhere, Tairi said, smiling despite her exhaustion. They're in our ships, in the narrate ships. They're free. The freed minds did more than escape. They spread through the Vizari systems, shutting them down from within. The great Vizari fleet fell quiet. Their weapons stopped working. Their defenses failed. 3 days later, the war was over. The Vizari surrendered. Without their stolen minds, without the creativity they had captured, they could not fight. In the following months, human ships began the long journey to find Earth again. Jai-Ho and Tairi led the first fleet. Han established a new government that worked alongside the narrate and other freed species. And the Vizari, they were not destroyed. Instead, they were contained to their homeworld, their technology limited so they could never again steal the minds of others. As Jai-Ho's ship prepared to leave for Earth, he looked back at Dust Bowl one last time. The Wasteland planet was changing already, with new cities rising from the sand. They thought trapping us there would be our end, he said to Tairi. Instead, it was just our beginning. Behind them, the stars waited, and somewhere among them was Earth, home to a species that had proven impossible to break.